We're back now with reaction from our panel. There's a lot to unpack. Dean, and I'll begin with you. In the previous segment, Michel Juneau-Katsuya, a former CSIS intelligence officer, made the revelation that governments for decades have turned a blind eye to Chinese interference, not necessarily because of willful negligence, but because it served their own interests. How is this blunt political power allowed to happen in this country?
I think that there's political expediency at times. We do not want to offend diaspora communities. We certainly have not wanted to offend Beijing because we saw a silver lining with opportunities with trade and commerce. And for many within this country, this is a direction that they wanted to take.
Listen, let's be honest. I'm not surprised, and I will not be surprised when the Chinese trying to spy on us. Let's just look at what's happened in the last few months, from police stations interfering in our elections, threatening our MPs, balloons flying over our head. None of this surprising me, because when I'm dealing with the Chinese communist regime, we know that they're the enemy of democracy. Now, we need to make something very clear to everybody watching us. Our battle is not with the Chinese people. It's very important that we understand. We appreciate our Chinese Canadian community. We know that the Chinese people, the first people to suffer from the Chinese communist regime, side by side with the Uyghurs, the Falun Gongs, and the Tibetans, and so on, and even the Christians. All what I am saying, my battle is with the communist regime. It's very important that we make this clear so we are not divided as a nation, not divided as a society. So we have to understand, I'm not surprised that the Chinese is attacking us or trying to do that. What's really surprising me, and should surprise every Canadian, is how the Canadian government is not acting on that. Because the first responsibility of the Canadian government is to protect its own citizen inside and outside of Canada. And for me to know that the Prime Minister and the government, and let's be honest, the CSIS and RCMP is not doing enough as well, with my all respect, that scares me a lot.
Sam, another revelation that came from my interview with Michel is the fact that there are Canadians within this country actively working against Canada's own interests. I mean, with all the investigation work that you have done at River Rock Casino and the 20 years that you've spent on this file, how widespread is that?
Yes, firstly, I would agree with everything Michel Juneau-Katsuya said. He knows very well this is a very sophisticated operation from Beijing. It's called the United Front Work Department. This is a body that reports up to the top levels of the Chinese Communist Party and seeks to make partnerships worldwide with what we would call elite influencers, that's politicians in democracies. Conversely, it tries to infiltrate through fear and through bribes, diaspora communities. So it's a terrifying situation in which people who have, in many cases, left the Chinese communist system to live freely in democracies are now experiencing an increasing erosion of freedom in Canada due to the United Front, which, according to my broad intelligence sourcing, uses what we would call hardened intelligence agents to run proxies within communities and to, let's just say it directly, rub shoulders with Canadian politicians, get donations going to very powerful party leaders, and in my research, indeed, as Juneau-Katsuya found, use criminal networks in that corruption activity.
Unbelievable. And honestly, Shun, it sounds like a conspiracy, but it isn't. It is real. And it is happening here in Canada.
Right.
From your perspective, how significant is the influence or control of the Chinese Communist Party over the diaspora community here?
Yeah, actually, not long after I arrived in Toronto, August 20th of 1989, that I learned the Chinese people, money, power, influence, everything are here. And I raised this question many times, even in Parliament. November 21st of 2006, I talked about this in a hearing in Parliament. So not only Canada, but the whole world deal with China as to treat a normal country and want to make them into the international community, especially the Beijing Olympic Games in 2008, that I tried so hard to boycott the Beijing Olympic Games. Of course, then I became probably the #1 enemy from China in Canada and to the Chinese, of course. And
I'm sure they made it known. Mr. Thorarinsson, just briefly before we go to break, Iceland reestablished ties with China around the same time as Canada, and over the last few years, political cooperation has grown, especially with the free trade agreement. I imagine relations between Iceland and China are not as strained as they are here. But how would you describe the relationship?
Well, first of all, I would say that what is happening here is quite interesting and worrisome between Canada and China. And I think Iceland can learn from the Canadian playbook. But we have a good relationship with China. It has been stable through the years, and we have this cooperation when it comes to development of green energy and Arctic affairs. We were the first European country or state to sign a free trade agreement with China, as you mentioned. And we have, of course, benefited from this FTA. As we all know, China is the second biggest economy in the world. China direct investment in Iceland is small, but a couple of years ago, they tried to buy a large amount of land, 55,000 square feet, 0.2% of the whole island. It was blocked by the government. We also rejected the Belt and Road deal. But we, of course, keep in mind our common interest, and we also stand firm on our principles, particularly when it comes to human rights issues. And we are not afraid of criticizing China when it comes to human rights violations. But in general, our relationship is good.
All right, hold that thought. We will pick this up on the other side. Don't go away.